Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach of Defend and Publish, and welcome to episode 57, Caring for Your Writing Self. Last week, I had to do a drive that is about 2 hours away from me, back and forth each way in a single day. And so I had time to actually listen to XM radio in the car. I have not been traveling, so I haven't really listened to XM, but I did have the chance to do that. And so I'm still sort of fascinated with XM radio because I'm just not somebody that listens to that a whole lot. And so I like cruising through the channels. And so I just was cruising through the channels, just basically one right after the other and just listening to, what was out there, what was all in my subscription that just got renewed. And I slowed down when I got to the Catholic channel. For the record, I am Catholic, so I slowed down because, that's part of my faith community. I'm interested in it. But, that's not one of my, I would say that's not one of the normal things that I'm listening to on a daily basis. So I slowed down because I was interested. And why I was interested is that the topic of the afternoon talk show by somebody named Katie McGrady, I might be wrong about that as her name, but one of the things that was the topic of this talk show was all about caring for your spiritual self. And I tuned in for a couple of minutes, and when I was listening to it, I sort of had this aha moment that caring for your spiritual self is a lot like caring for your writing self. And what I mean by that is that in the show, Katie, the host, talked a lot about things that she does to just make sure that her batteries are charged so she could take care of her family and, take care of, the spiritual needs she has to connect with others and worship in the church and those sorts of things. And, a lot of the things that she mentioned, I could see really clear parallels to caring for a writing self. And so I just wanted to throw a couple of things out there to think about if you are caring for your writing self, because I'll tell you what, that hour on the way home, I was scribbling down ideas thinking, wow, this would be a great idea for a podcast. So thank you, Katie McGrady, for your show. I will put a link to you in my show notes because it was honestly a really, really cool episode for her. But one of the things that she talked about was this idea about making sure that your batteries are fully charged. We hear this all the time, like get enough sleep and, eat nutritious foods and make sure that you're moving your body if you are able to do that and those sorts of things. And she did, mention those for a minute. But one of the other things that she mentioned is, sometimes she needs to take, some time out of her day and just mindlessly look at stuff at Target, and another part of her day, she might do something else. And when I was thinking about this, that might not seem to directly translate to writing. It might seem we might go to Target to escape doing any writing projects. But the way that she described it, I could see these parallels. And so here's some of the things that she got me thinking about, which might in turn help you. So she did talk about this idea of community a little bit. And I was thinking about caring for your writing self sometimes for some people, because writing is very individual, just like spirituality is probably very individual. Sometimes you might need to have some sort of a community connection with your writing self. So I'd encourage you at this moment to think about if there are times that you're feeling really isolated from your discipline, from other writers. Maybe you're a second-year faculty member and it's been a long time since you've had any, faculty support or anybody caring about what you're doing with your writing. This might also be true of you as a full professor or somebody that's on a non-tenure track position where maybe those supports aren't built into the system, or graduate students, kind of struggling to find your way. So, community might be one of those things that you need. And so, she's pointing out connections to going to mass or going to the church. But, I could totally see this being something where maybe you need to find a writing group. Maybe you need to connect with some other graduate students in your cohort or a faculty member down the hall. Or maybe you need to start a faculty writing group and be the person that's, kind of the spark to get it going. Maybe you need to see what kind of groups we offer on Defend and Publish. I certainly could throw some things out there. But maybe it's time to say, well, I keep putting it off. I keep putting it off and trying to do it on my own. Maybe it's time to try to find one. There's plenty of free groups out there. On Twitter, I know that lots of times they'll do writing challenges where everybody, says they're going to go write, and then you go and do it. You can share your progress with other people. So this isn't something that ever has to be paid for. You can definitely find some of these supports, but maybe that's something that you might be needing. Another thing that I was thinking about with this is the idea she talked about this idea to have space and time to think. She didn't phrase it in that way, but that's how I took it as, is that by recharging her batteries, sometimes, for example, as a mom and somebody with a job, full-time talk show host with other responsibilities, she did talk about this idea of having, some alone time and the necessary time for that to really, connect with how she's feeling and how she's feeling as a spiritual person. That's, very much true for writing. A lot of times we do need that space and time to think about ideas. So I think a lot of the emphasis, at least on getting writing finished or completed, is all on productivity. How many words per minute can I crank out? How many pages can I crank out? And this is one of the reasons why I've kind of resisted either one of those models the entire time I've been doing this type of research, because I am far more interested in using the time to think about ideas if you need to do that. So you might have a writing session, for example, where you don't do any writing. And I know one of our past episodes called Don't Call It a Writing Session emphasizes that very idea, that sometimes you're not actually doing writing in the traditional way of sitting down at the desk in your computer that we might be thinking about. I've done this before where I've actually had a very productive writing session that isn't about writing at all, where I've actually scheduled time to think. So I know that at one semester I had a 45-minute period between some weird meetings. And of course, as probably a lot of our inclination is, there's the time to shovel in some lunch, grade 5 papers, do my email, fill out that annoying form that I owe the registrar, or whatever the thing is that you have to do. And I really pushed back on this, and I decided, for those 45 minutes, I'm going to take a nice little walk around campus. And yes, I'm physically able to do that, and just think about my projects. And honestly, that did more to recharge my writing batteries than 5 hours clocked in the library, much as I love my library, ever could. So you might think about trying to find even a half hour where you can just sit there and think about your ideas. And if your attention wanders to something else, that's fine. Just gently bring it back to what it is that you're trying to think about. This is one of the reasons why I like to do it when I'm exercising or walking, because then the pressure isn't to sit there and be like, okay, I've got to come up with a great idea, because that's not necessarily the point. You might use time to read what you've already written and just kind of think about that for a minute. So that might be a way to recharge your batteries and just kind of get that time to open back up and connect with it versus the go mentality. Another thing that I can think of is that Katie mentioned in her show at Target, on that Target run she mentioned, she did buy a couple of things that she needed and things that she didn't need. And, she acknowledges there's all kinds of, certainly in her case and in mine, white privilege and all these other things and the economic affordances of being able to do that. So putting that aside for 1 second, she is thinking, when she was talking about this, she was thinking about at this moment, her home environment and what did she feel like she needed to make it work for her in some way. And so at this moment, not to go into her entire episode, but she basically talked about having these things for her children to kind of enhance the culture and the things she wanted them to feel at home, to feel safe, to feel loved, to not feel like, they needed all this extra stuff in the world. So it was kind of, a good point that she was getting at, despite the fact that she bought something. So she did buy something. But what I took from that to mean is that sometimes you need to find things that can sustain your writing self. And they don't all have to be paid for. Many of them can be free. So, for example, I know I mentioned a couple episodes ago, and I will make sure I stick this in the show notes as well, but I found using Asana project management board as something that I didn't think I needed. I decided, I want to try a new tool this year and get into something. And I really got into it. And it did kick in my writing and give me a boost to how I think about my writing projects. That didn't cost anything in the free version. I'll put a link to Asana in the show notes, so if you want to check that out. So just kind of organizing one of my projects in a new way, that did give me a boost to make sure that I have a good map going forward for a very complex revision that I needed to do. And as I mentioned, I'll link to that episode. For some of you, it might be, I really need to clean up my writing space. For others of you, it might be, I need a different writing space. Maybe I do need a new chair that is more comfortable for me to sit in when I'm working. Maybe I do need one of those little tabletop desks to make sure that I can stand up. And I will put another link in our show notes to one of those, because those are a pretty cheap investment. But a lot of the coaches or a lot of the clients that we have say they make a big difference, because you're not always sitting. You can stand up when you feel energetic. You could start your writing session typing when you're still feeling at the most, at the highest point of energy. So these are certainly some things. Other things that you might think about. I always buy myself a new book on helping myself as a writer every year. So I've had some really good ones, many of which I have mentioned on the show. One that I really liked was How to Be a Happy Academic. I think that was the title. I will put a link to the show notes for that one. Another book that I bought one year was The Write No Matter What, the Jolie Jensen. Again, I'll put a link in show notes. But those books, I try to buy one of those types of books every year to sort of kick off my new year. And for me, when I was buying those, it's always in, August, September to like kick off the new academic year. Yours might be in January or February. But I liked that too, because I'm thinking about my writing self. So just as I might buy a book about nutrition or about exercise, or listen to a podcast about nutrition or exercise, which might, in most cases are probably free. You could do the same thing with writing podcasts. I mean, certainly Defend and Publish has a podcast. Hopefully you're following us and watching not just this episode, but hearing the other ones. But, there are many other writing podcasts that are out there. I will link to a couple of others in the show notes that I am following that I think are really interesting. So, just to put something out there that has you thinking about your writing in a more active way can be another way to care for your writing self. So hopefully these suggestions just gave you some food for thought about that. And, maybe a goal this week is just think about, what am I doing for myself as a writer? New pens. Do I need a new book? Do I need to buy something? Do I need to find a source? Do I need to connect with other people? What is it that might help me? And if that, certainly if that ever involves writing coaching, you want to do a free consultation with us, absolutely. We have a link in the show notes to that always. So, you can come to us if you want to see if you can kickstart something. But yeah, there's lots of resources out there and many of those are free. So I'd encourage you to think about what you need for your writing self this week. And hope that helps us some advice. Happy writing.